latest webinar session or the Hyperbaric HPP Academia Network. We will be starting soon. We'll just give a couple of minutes, seconds for all the attendees to get into the meeting, and we'll get everything, all the audio settings in place. So you can please hold on the line. We'll be starting shortly, and thank you for joining. So let's get started with the session. Again, thank you everyone for joining. My name is Vinicio. I work at Hyperbaric as an HPP application specialist. And today is my pleasure to host this webinar session alongside a very renowned panelists. We have Dr. Grina Danaus, professor, researcher at Nebraska University. She's heavily involved in the industry outreach activities and a very valuable asset for the institution. Lately, she also develops or leads research efforts on the pet food industry, HPP, as one of the largest or fastest expanding sectors within the industry. Today, we also have Dr. Erdogan Ceylan, from fellow at Marriott NutriSciences. He's a widely world-renowned process authority, not only for HPP, but non-thermal, thermal processing, chilled frozen foods. He actually just recently co-authored a very thorough review with providing or discussing general guidelines in terms of what are the needs for validation studies as a whole. And last but not least, we have Greg Valdi from Bureau Veritas. He's the sales manager. Greg, his team has collaborated with Hyperbaric since 2012 in the collaboration again with validation studies. So there are thousands of products that are there in the market. Hundreds of companies have benefited with the service provided by Greg and his team. But he will not, unfortunately, not be present today due to an emergency, but we'll get through today. So for today's agenda, over here we will start with some of highlighting Hyperbaric's efforts in terms of R&D projects, introduce the Academia Network, our panelists, open up the microphone for our panelists for a roundtable discussion, and for all of those of you in the audience, anytime during the presentation, you can submit your questions into the chat, and we will be covering any questions you may have at the end of the session. So again, I will be introducing some of the research efforts performed by Hyperbaric. First, just a brief introduction of the company. So Hyperbaric was founded in 1999. It's a Spanish-based company in the city of Burgos, Spain, which is approximately 2 hours north of Madrid. So in more than 20 years of experience related to the HPP food and biotechnology industry, we have more than 3,450 installations, 60% of the market share, which is quite outstanding. And this is not just a coincidence. This is because part of the philosophy of Hyperbaric is always pushing through innovation. So as you can see over here in these words by our CEO, Andres Hernando, who has been with the company since the foundation, that innovation is present in each and every step, each decision that it's made towards the planning of the Hyperbaric company. So that gives us a lead, and Hyperbaric has been always present with cutting edge technology. So this is not only the words, but again, it's something that we take seriously in our philosophy. 10% of our annual revenue is destined for R&D activities. More than 25% of our personnel is highly technically skilled. We have doctors, masters, technologists that are highly skilled within different research areas. So Hyperbaric's research efforts greatly divided into three, or basically two teams: the engineering in automation, making the equipment, improving always the components to make it work reliably. All the automatism and peripherals that will help you to get the highest production, the greatest throughput. In terms of the applications of food processing, we dive more into the biochemical, food, biotechnology applications, help customers, potential buyers in this regard, and an R&D management team that monitors patents related to the HPP industry, and obviously helps us to apply for patents of our newest discovery. So such is the expertise, the knowledge Hyperbaric has built in these 22 years since the foundation, that it actually allowed the company to expand its product line. So we are the leaders in HPP for food and manufacturing processing. And we have also dived into new sectors such as the hydrostatic pressure equipment intended to build materials for the industrial, aeronautic, and aerospace industries, and also in the need for greener alternatives in terms of energy, hydrogen compressors that will provide a valuable asset in the coming years. So I want to get started with terms of the food and processing regarding the equipment, because when you want to buy for equipment, it's we fulfill our commitments of that it will be operating reliably. It's our guarantee. So it's sometimes very easy to take all the research efforts performing the equipment part for granted. And since the very beginning, we have a top of the world engineering team that has landed things that have remained with the same design throughout these 22 years. Such is the case of the high pressure yoke. So overall, in the equipment, you have the vessel in which you place the foods and inject the water to raise the pressure. The vessel is closed by plugs on both ends. And then you have the yoke, this big metal frame, which basically has the Herculean or the Atlas task of holding everything together. So the world is ending right there inside in the vessel. The yoke is holding everything in place. And since our foundation, we have never changed a yoke in these 22 years, more than 350 installations, which is outstanding since, again, this equipment is consistently operating at 87,000 PSI, 6,000 bars of pressure. Other improvements, like in anything, you learn on the run. And again, our commitment to R&D activities. The latest, this year we launched the CJ pipes, which have actually 3 times the previous lifetime, increased from 15,000 to more than 50,000 cycles. Again, first company in the world to do this and consistently operate at 87,000 PSI, 6,000 bars. Part of our improvements are also related to the high pressure intensifiers or high pressure pumps. On the plot over here on the bottom right, you can see how the productivity of our highest selling equipment, the Hyperbaric 300, has steadily increased over the years. So it's 3 or 4 times more productive when it was in the early stages in 2003. And this has also allowed for the price to decrease by 4. So again, this is something we always do. Our intensifiers are independent, indicating that if you need to do preventive maintenance in one of them, you can still continue operating first in the world. And in the case of the intensifiers, the coming future, we are working on friendlier environmental alternatives. So we will be posting more on this in the nearby future, fortunately, hopefully. We continue up with the production. So it's not only the vessel, the intensifiers, but also building up for larger equipment, larger vessels that allow to place more food per cycle. So you can see over here, Hyperbaric again was founded in 1999. 2002, we installed our first equipment. And then the very early stages of the exponential growth of the HPP industry here in the United States. The largest vessel was close to 250 liters, 200 liters. Hyperbaric comes over 300, builds up to the 350 other major vendors. And we have now the 420 and 525 liters, which remains as the largest equipment throughout the world. So we are not the first company to get into the HPP industry, but well, just like in professional sports, it's not a big deal. So people can remember the first founders of the teams, organizations that were the founders of the league, in example, the latest team to win the championship. But what people are really amazed of, what people are actually remember, are those organizations that are always there on the top, competing and consistently winning. And we have been very fortunate that our Hyperbaric team in the engineering part is part of this. So you can see that throughout the history of the HPP industry, major landmarks achieved by Hyperbaric. The first horizontal equipment reached 6,000 bars. So first generation of equipment were vertical vessels that required a crane to load and unload the product. Hyperbaric comes over with a horizontal design, which allows for a more organic production flow. So again, twice we have gotten into the market with the largest, most productive units, 420 liters, 525 liters, which remains until today. And it's not just us, our clients, but also peers in the industry that have recognized both of these latest or largest units. And again, just an image over here of the 525 liter unit, which has the capacity of processing, in average, 6,600 up to 7,000 pounds per hour, 10 cycles approximately for average conditions. So we have not just stopped there in terms of the bulk concept for semi-continuous or continuous food processing. It's a concept that has been in the industry for a while, but Hyperbaric is the first company that actually takes it and makes it a reality in the industry. So in this case, rather than having the baskets that carry the food into the vessel, we have a large pouch that fills nearly 90% of the vessel, and it's currently being used for juice and beverage processing. It overcomes also packaging limitations, allowing processors to choose between 100% recycled plastic, paperboard, glass, metal cans, etc. So here are just takeaways of our first installation after 1.5 years running our client in France, Hermes Bosons. Again, some of the key takeaways that they were a co-packer for PepsiCo, so they had a thermal pasteurization juice production line. They talk about the seamless operation, automatization, and its minimal interaction regarding the personnel in order to operate the equipment. That the total cost of ownership is nearly the same as a conventional thermal pasteurization technique, but you have the benefits of the HPP technology while overcoming, again, the packaging limitations for conventional impact equipment. So again, it's not only our clients, not only us, but our peers in the industry that have recognized this achievement. And again, the Hyperbaric bulk has been awarded already with 5 awards and more in the coming years. Finally, in terms of the equipment and engineering department, that we have everything in place for you to improve your production. So from relatively simple tilting stations for loading and unloading the product, very sophisticated robotics and automatizations for traceability, and again, to improve the production in your facilities. So now we jump into the applications team, which deals with a final food biotechnology concept or development. Over here, we are led by Dr. Carol Tonello, who is just an institution by herself. She's been with Hyperbaric since 2003, always involved or combining both research activities with industry development, applied research, and well, she just has published different journal publications, been involved in different projects. She's also involved in the new production lines for the HIP and the hydrogen compressors. So we are very fortunate to have her within ourselves as part of or leading the team. And here we have the rest of the applications team, where along with my colleagues who reside in Spain, Mario, Rui, Berta, and myself, Vinicio, we take care of all the inquiries for customers and potential buyers around the world. So we follow up in terms of the now R&D efforts of the application staff that will be focused heavily in terms of developing future application, extending the capabilities of the Hyperbaric bulk technology. So we want to go beyond juices, and use this for carbonated beverages such as beer. Have the Hyperbaric bulk to have as a two-step production step, in which you kind of infuse or extract chemical compounds of interest, in this case, to make cold brew coffee, cold brew tea, and pasteurize on the same step. Again, it's both the extraction and the pasteurization on the same step with the Hyperbaric bulk. And last but not least, we'll get to know in better detail what are the limits in terms of the viscosity, particle size, and follow alternative approaches so that we are able to use the Hyperbaric bulk for processing thicker products such as fruit purees. Well, we are not by ourselves, but we also partner with some companies throughout the world. This year, we just launched, along with Paytainer, the first HPP keg made out of mainly of PET with PP fittings that are, well, recyclable by themselves. You can see over here the image of the products going into the HPP equipment. And over here on the right, the first user, Francine Covelli from Norwich Juice Bar, which uses the container kegs for juice production here in the United States. So not only juice, but again, we can also do cold brew coffee, plant-based alternatives, carbonated beverages, and many more we expect to see in the coming years. So high pressure and high temperature, combining high temperature levels in order to achieve shelf-stable foods, the final frontier in high pressure processing industry. So we are capable of building equipment that basically heats up the whole vessel, but in reality, in industrial operation, keeping this whole metal block, very large metal block, the vessel, heated to a certain temperature is economically not feasible. So we partnered with CSIRO, an Australian research center, in which we have been developing an insulated canister that will allow to heat foods inside a canister in order to run them and protect the rest of the components of the conventional HPP equipment that's currently operating all over the world. More technical projects, in this case biopreservation, with some European researchers, in which we take an alternative approach, screen microorganisms to see whether some of these can outgrow pathogens, spore-forming pathogens that are not eliminated with HPP. So if they outgrow these spore-forming pathogens, they can be used as an alternative natural preservation method. So we will see some of these results in the upcoming future. In terms of the juices and beverages, well, my colleague Mario just got his doctoral dissertation, my apologies, by investigating the effects of the risk associated with a pathogen, Clostridium botulinum, survives HPP, but whether it's still capable of growing and producing toxin in coconut water. Likewise, screening different strains, let's say subspecies of pathogens such as E. coli, Listeria, Salmonella, to find those that are most resistant to high pressure, that can actually recover faster so that they can be used for product validation. We have reviews over here on updated topics or current topics such as plant proteins. Rui Queiroz, it's our specialist in protein HPP processing. There's also a recent review discussing, well, the needs of developing mathematical guidelines for HPP process design, how this can help in order to produce safe harbors in which validation will be no longer needed, and discuss, well, that we also need to try to focus research activities into conditions that are actually being used by the industry, not just for the sake of research, which of course can be in order to have further applications. So we also participate, collaborate in the elaboration of book chapters to try to share our thoughts, our experience with technical peers. In this book, co-edited by Carol, well, we have chapters talking about the equipment, talking about the packaging. This other book, we have an update regarding different food and beverage applications for the HPP industry. This book over here was launched in 2011. Carol participated, and well, this book helped food agencies, governmental agencies, researchers, people in the industry to get better knowledge regarding non-thermal technologies, because it has been a huge success. The IFT editorial board is actually paving the way for a second edition and updated, and we have been appointed to participate as well as a team. And again, we collaborate with IFT closely in the annual event. The annual event in conjunction with EFOST, the European Food Science Technology Association, and in order, related to workshops for non-thermal food processing. Here are participations since even before these years, but we annually participate in this type of events, and here just some screenshots of the last annual IFT event. So as a whole, you can see it's plenty of what we do at the applications tab, but it's only our secondary functions. Our main goals or duties here, it's to assist customers, potential buyers, with everything related to the food processing. So we provide general guidance, testing in terms of the food formulation, packaging, assist or guidance on validation studies. And well, this is just an image of the sales staff here in the Hyperbaric USA office, where you are welcome to come over, pay us a visit, or ship samples to perform as many trials as you need free of charge. So once you get a good knowledge of how your product evolves during the storage, that you're comfortable with your formulation, and you are ready to hit the market, then you can get started with a validation study. So as of now, there are no current regulations or guidance for HPP foods. So basically, all products going into the market need to go through a validation study. So you send this over to a lab, get in touch with the process authority to establish whether the applied HPP cycle parameters, pressure level, holding time, formulation properties, and storage conditions are safe for consumers. So we are trying to eliminate foodborne pathogens and make sure that they do not grow back during storage. This is something that, well, we do not do by ourselves, like in the research activities, and we rely heavily on our R&D network for us to continue, well, getting the latest research advances, collaborating, well, in many other areas as well. We talked about the challenge studies, but some of these partners in the HPP Academia Network also provide testing for product development, small, medium enterprises, how to grow your project. So business planning and support, testing, and well, lots of workshops, not only for HPP, but in general, how to apply or generate HACCP plan regulations. They are a very valuable asset throughout the world. Here in the United States, where we have two of our panelists, Nebraska University, Marist NutriSciences. We also collaborate with Cornell University, here in Miami, Florida International University, certified labs as well. In Canada, we have, again, Bureau Veritas, who was joining us or joined us for this webinar session. Recently, we have the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, the Canadian Center for Fishery Innovation, and the Center for Food Development in Quebec as part of our network. And there are plenty more around the world. So in our next webinar session, we will be for the Spanish language audience. We will be covering the rest of the academia network throughout the world. So this is all for the time being. Now I would like to hand over the reins of the presentation to Grace to carry over with her presentation. And thank you for joining us, Grace.
Yep. Can you advance the, okay. Next slide, please. I'm having trouble. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Vinicio. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce everyone to the UNL Food Processing Center, which I'm affiliated with. So as Vinicio mentioned, I'm a research associate professor over at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln in the Department of Food Science and Technology, and I'm affiliated with this Food Processing Center, which is really a small but mighty group of faculty and staff consultants in a wide range of areas within food manufacturing. So on the right-hand side here, I've listed some of our services. So for myself and my team, we coordinate the high pressure processing services. So we look at optimizing, let's say an HPP recipe. So what pressure, what time, what temperatures you need in order to render your product safe. We certainly conduct validation studies for industry clients. Sometimes we can do some microbial challenge studies, especially for companies who are looking at evaluating the efficacy of certain antimicrobial chemical treatments. And then certainly we also work with our microbiology group to do some shelf life studies. So besides HPP, the Food Processing Center certainly has a state-of-the-art pilot plant facility. So we can also do a lot of other food processes, such as dairy processing, extrusion, spray drying. Pretty excited about our new freeze drying facilities. Certainly we've done the more traditional thermal processing and as I mentioned earlier, HPP. So besides that, we have a chemistry group, a microbiology group that could also do some testing for certain properties of your food product. We can also do some sensory analysis and nutritional labeling, as well as, just like as other universities, the Department of Food Sciences, they usually can provide some training programs related to food safety through their extension network. So those are some of the things that the FPC does. And if you need additional information or want to get connected to the right experts, you can certainly email me. On the bottom right is my email address. While I cannot divulge some of the products or companies that I've worked with in the past, I basically decided to list here some of our research activities and capabilities. So it gives you an idea about the breadth and the depth of the kinds of research or collaboration or projects that we can do with a food manufacturer. So on the left-hand side, my group focuses a lot on HPP optimization, validation studies, and also as an engineer, I'm really interested in looking at other applications of HPP besides pasteurization. So for example, I have a student, she's working with plant-based milks. We're trying to see what happens to the proteins in plant-based milks. And if we were to conduct hydrolysis of those plant-based proteins under pressure, does that give us any benefits? Hold on, the lights in my office turned off. Does that give us any benefits at all where we can potentially get better functionality, better activity of the peptides that come out of that process? Then on the middle portion of the slide, my colleagues in microbiology certainly also do some HPP validation studies, but more recently, they've been looking at evaluating different potential surrogates that we can use to evaluate a process so that a process validation potentially could happen inside the plant. So looking at Listeria innocua, Enterococcus faecium, and some of the lactic acid bacteria as potential surrogates to evaluate the efficacy of an HPP treatment. And finally, for those of you that are familiar with the Food Allergen Research and Resource Program, or FARP, here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, that is also affiliated with our Food Science and Technology Department. And we've had a few projects with those experts and the faculty and their students to look at what happens when a particular protein gets HPP'd instead of receiving the typical thermal process. Can we still detect those food allergens in the food material? So as you can see here at UNL Food Processing Center in the Department of Food Science and Technology, we look at food safety not just from the microbial point of view, but we also look at it at the chemical point of view. So with that, I'm looking forward to receiving some of your questions later on in the webinar, but I'll go ahead and give the floor to Erdogan so he can talk about his institution.
Thank you, Grace. Let me see if I can switch the slide. All right, perfect. My company is Mereo NutriSciences, which is headquartered in Chicago. It's an international network of accredited testing laboratories. Okay, let's try this one more time. All right, perfect. So currently we are present in 27 different countries with more than and we have more than 8,000 employees working in our laboratories globally. Okay, perfect. So we offer a wide range of testing and consulting services to the food industry, agrochemical, pharmaceutical, and cosmetics industry. We have analytical services for microbiology, chemistry, consulting, auditing, training. And we do also offer shelf life studies, sensory studies, challenge studies, and process validation studies. We do have a center specialized in running shelf life and challenge studies as well as process validation studies. And these studies especially become very critical in evaluating the safety and quality of high pressure processing applications for different foods. We do run challenge studies routinely just to evaluate the effectiveness of HPP against spoilage organisms and pathogens in different types of products. Unfortunately, I'm not able to share any of that data, but we do run studies to validate different types of foods when we treat them with HPP. That's pretty much what I have for today. Vinicio?
Sure, thank you, Erdogan. And again, it's so unfortunate that today Greg was not able to join us due to an emergency. So I will just briefly be presenting some of his slides, and you can see your Veritas labs. The numbers speak by themselves. They are all over the world as well. Lots of revenue, lots of clients, technical staff throughout the world to help you through with testing, accreditations, other services, and not only for food microbiology, for labeling, nutrition testing. And again, they have a network strategically expanded throughout the United States and then Canada in order to meet your demands. Again, in terms of the HPP, it's a long collaborator with Hyperbaric, and again, lots of companies have benefited from their services, as in the case of Veritas of Nebraska. They focused, in this case of Veritas, mostly on the juices, salsas, salads, hummus, ready-to-eat meats. And well, any questions that you may have, I will be glad to hand over to Greg. So now we will be stop sharing screen and open up the floor for the panelists to come over and then start with a roundtable session. Just for people in the audience, just a friendly reminder that you can post your questions over here on the chat. So first question over here, perhaps very simple, but in order to get the non-technical audience engaged, the difference between a shelf life study and a validation study.
I can start. So for us, I guess a validation study really involves looking at pathogens, the most pertinent pathogens that could potentially be in the food system, and then depends on, I guess, what type of food it is. So let's say it was a juice product. You then have to comply with FDA requirements that you demonstrate that the pasteurization technique that you're using can lead to at least a 5-log reduction in that pathogen over the shelf life of the product, and that you maintain that safety. So whereas the shelf life study would require you to look at the spoilage microorganisms, so things that won't necessarily kill you, can certainly still make you sick, but besides the spoilage microorganisms, you may look at other properties of the juice that could change over time. So let's say vitamin A content, perhaps the consistency of the juice or the viscosity, color, and that type of thing. So Erdogan, do you want to maybe add something to that, especially if it relates to other food items?
Absolutely. We should also include sensory in shelf life. When we talk about a shelf life study, we are not necessarily focusing on the safety aspects of it, as you said. Product can be safe after so many days of storage, but if you see phase separation, for example, or rancidity and other things, probably it won't make you sick, but from the consumer's perspective, when they see it, they wouldn't buy it. So that pretty much determines the shelf life, but it can be perfectly safe to consume. And also, maybe one more side note for validation studies. To validate something, you have to have a process. If you have a process, then you need to validate it. High pressure processing is a treatment, so that if you choose to use high pressure processing, then it needs to be validated.
Awesome, thank you, Grace and Aaron. So next question, how do I get started with either Nebraska University started, Marius Intersciences with a shelf life or validation study? What's the procedure that the audience needs to follow?
Grace, do you want to go first? Yeah. So for us here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, it really starts with calling me, or sending me an email. The reason for that is, as Erdogan mentioned, process validation studies really are about your process. So it's not just like, I have this juice product and this is what I do. We need to kind of discuss how you're producing these, the quality of ingredients you come in, what are the typical holding patterns and temperatures that you're doing before and after HPP, because that could also be included in the validation study, because that could affect the efficacy of the HPP overall. So those are some of the things that we do. Is it always starts with a conversation with me, and then we would kind of develop a scope of work. And so it's really customized to what you're doing. So Erdogan? Yeah, for us, we have a network of salespeople. They can get in touch with you, but we have other ways of communicating as well. If you go to our main website,
some of the questions that we ask. If you want to have a shelf life study, validation study, then that will be forwarded to us, our research team. And you can always contact me directly. I don't know if we included our contact information in the previous slides, but definitely, yeah. The fastest one will be calling our 800 number on our website or just emailing us. Then we will definitely get in touch with you.
Thank you. So now, well, question by the audience, if you want to share, but an approximate pricing range for shelf life validation studies and any other general recommendations you want to give the audience when engaging into these sort of projects.
Yeah, the price really depends on what you want us to study and how often you want us to kind of pull material from during the shelf life of the product, right? And such. But typically, you know, these are going to be a few $1,000s, and depending on the number of products, depending on the number of treatments that you want tested and the number of pathogens you want to subject to the product in the process for a validation study, then it starts to kind of add up. One of the things that I always tell people who want to do a validation study is you want to make sure that the product formula is really, you're at the end of it, of that stage. Like, you know, this is your product. Certainly, part of that is because when we do the challenge study or the validation study, if there are any changes at all to your product formulation, so let's say a change in pH, or later on you add more salts to it potentially that then changes the water activity of the food product, then that might actually render the study that we had just done invalid, because all of a sudden there's a whole new range of risks that we need to kind of account for. So that's one of the things, but certainly the earlier you talk to somebody or talk to a process authority, the better. You know, you can kind of include it as part of developing your process and your product. But before you actually do the study, it's really beneficial and highly recommended that you have finalized your process and your product.
And in addition to that, I totally agree. Earlier the better in terms of discussing you know, how to run the study. It's difficult to give a number in terms of how much it's going to cost, but we highly suggest that we get involved in discussions early enough so we can do risk analysis for the type of product you run. And one of the other things that we suggest is that we can group samples. You know, if you have more than one formula or different types of products, instead of running all of them, we can group them, or we can choose a reference product to minimize the cost. Otherwise, if we try to run a validation for each single formula, it will be very, very costly. It's always good to, you know, discuss the product characteristics ahead of time.
Correct. So we also have lots of very maybe specific questions regarding very specific products, but just to say that fortunately you will get some work to or all leads over here. But overall, that well, HPP is quite varied, can be applied for uses of beverages, hummus, ready-to-eat meats, ready meals. Basically, as long as it's not dry goods, or as long as it's in plastic packaging and you fit it into the unit, it's very likely that it can be processed with the HPP. But one of the questions also, what's the difference between HPP and thermal pasteurization, whether HPP can achieve sterility, and if you want to answer that.
Erdogan, you go first. I've been going first.
Well, we need to define the sterility first. I don't think you can get sterile food using HPP. You might end up getting sterile food, commercially sterile, maybe, but then I don't think that product will be consumable anymore. So HPP doesn't provide a commercial sterile product. It provides sort of pasteurized product. You know, we use the pasteurization, the word pasteurization very vaguely for everything, but if we have to choose one description, it provides you a pasteurized product, not commercially sterile product, because HPP currently is not very effective against spore formers. but it becomes very effective against vegetative pathogens like E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, and some spoilage organisms.
Yeah, and kind of adding to that, because of the fact that HPP does not affect spores, then you have, you have to make sure that the product is suitably has a lower pH, has a low pH, is suitably acidified, and then in some cases may need some antimicrobial agent in there to control for, let's say, C. botulinum. And because it's pasteurized, all of these, the fact that it doesn't affect spores, the products do need to be refrigerated throughout the shelf life of the product. So these are not meant to be shelf-stable products.
Okay, thank you. So we also see lots of people asking, well, I think you both provided the email address, but not only for validation shelf life studies, but also for collaboration in research. So I guess both of you are really open to this and open to the networking. And one last question. So we have been heavily focusing on the HPP part, microbial, in fact, which is a very narrow range of lots of things that you need to develop a food product. So if you want to extend more on these services and recommendations for product development that you may provide in your institutions.
I can go first. We have a whole department totally focused on sensory, and we do have a group of scientists. They do clinical trials. So if you have any claims in terms of health benefits and everything for any product, we have our clinical side, and we do have our sensory side that they can evaluate the acceptance of a new product or different formulations. And if you do make changes in your formula and product, so our sensory group will be definitely more than happy to help you on that. And for the micro side or chemistry, when we talk about shelf life and product development, our Food Science Center in Crete, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago, we do run shelf life and challenge studies as well as validation studies there. And we can evaluate the new product under different conditions. It could be different humidity level, different temperature, different packaging, even different lights. And in some cases, we evaluated the products under different atmospheric conditions. It could be in the presence of carbon dioxide or nitrogen and vacuum packaged products. So we can definitely help on that. And I think it will be very helpful. Maybe after this presentation, we add our contact information. So if you have any questions, then you can definitely.
Yeah, kind of at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, again, because we're at the university, our strength is really, I think, working with other faculty members and students who may not necessarily have HPP at their institutions. So I've had some researchers actually contact me, and we allow them to come, bring their products in. We advise them on, this is typically how industry works right now. So if you're trying to see if, within your particular area or the particular food items that you're trying to look into, that we can kind of give them some starting points for, what the process might be and such. But certainly because it's research, we try to push beyond the limits of where industry is right now. And so one of the things that we do have a smaller HPP unit in the department or in the food processing center that allows us to go at much higher pressures and combine it with higher temperatures than typically we'd see in industry. So there's been a lot of interest, especially when it comes to looking at, potentially changing starch structure or changing proteins and such. So I think that's some of the more exciting things that we do. It's not, I would say, a specific service to industry at this point, but for any researchers out there looking and interested in doing HPP, but may not necessarily have access to the equipment, I think that's kind of like a unique thing that we can do here at the University of Nebraska.
For sure, and all this knowledge helps the community as a whole, industry research to continue growing. Again, thank you for your participation, Grace, Erdogan. We will be finalizing this just by sharing again my screen. Just to make sure that you already got a contact both of Grace, Erdogan. We also have plenty of resources over here on our website, flyer, white papers, webinar recordings of each specific food sector, and many more. We have the latest news of the HPP industry, what's happening. We also have an HPP Innovation Week, which took place in June, but it's available freely on demand. So we cover a little bit of everything from basic concepts all the way to machine working, the peripherals, latest trends, technical sessions. So a little bit of everything, again, available on our website. And again, just thank you, Grace, Erdogan, for your participation. Greg, again, sorry that we miss you today. But well, if you have any questions, we will be glad to follow up those unanswered questions through email. Here's our email address. And again, thank you, our attendees, for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.